There's a poem called Footsteps in the Sand, and it talks about a person having a real rocky life, and he's following the footsteps in the sand, and at one point there are two sets of footprints, and at another point there's only one set of footprints, and he asked God why at one point in his life there was only one set of footprints, and God says, well, those were the times that I was carrying you. You weren't able to walk on your own, so I carried you. And when I read that poem for the first time, I looked back on my life and I thought, wow, that's exactly what happened to me.
The extraordinary story of Peggy Bearden makes it clear that the power of love can overcome even the most horrific childhood. In order to tell this story, we must include some graphic details that are not suitable for children. We don't tell the story because of how it begins, but because of how it ends. This is a story of radical transformation. Hillary Carr reports.
Peggy Bearden grew up during the Depression in a house much like this one in the small lumber town of Springville, California. One of her earliest memories was the sound of singing coming from the church next door.
They were singing Jesus Loves Me and Amazing Grace. And I always wondered who this man was that they called Jesus. And I was also always asking the people, is your name Jesus? And they would look and they would say, why no, why? Well, I'm looking for that man that I hear them sing about named Jesus. Which one is Jesus?
Peggy didn't have a lot of time to wonder about the church next door. Finding enough food to eat was the primary concern. While other kids were learning their ABCs, Peggy and her 5 younger siblings were learning to steal enough food to survive. And it didn't much matter who or what they stole it from.
I learned to steal early in life as a way of feeding my siblings. I stole from the local markets. Later, I stole from people's hen houses. I stole their eggs and their chickens. I soon found out that the chickens were far too noisy, so I started stealing the rabbits. They were easier to steal.
We had no running water, no electricity, very few clothes, never enough to eat. And it is true that I looked down on Peggy Bearden, and for me to look down on Peggy when I was so very poor myself and so very needy myself did mean that she was a very, I hate to use the word pitiful, but a very pitiful child.
And I remember Peggy always standing back, never mingling with the other kids, just standing back, thin, dirty, 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 dirty. And the kids would make fun of her and she'd fight.
At school, I was always in trouble, and the teachers locked me in the cloakroom. And I loved being locked in the cloakroom because that's the only place I could eat. And I would eat everybody's lunches. First, I would go through and eat what I liked the best. And if I were still hungry, I'd go and like what I liked next to the best.
I can remember that she wouldn't take, my whole lunch would never be gone, but bits and pieces of my lunch would be gone. And I can remember that, but I never knew until later she was the one that was doing it. But I, yes, do know that my lunch had been taken many times, many times.
Eventually, I learned that I wasn't supposed to eat the lunches, and I would try real hard to not eat those lunches. I would even knock on the door telling the teacher she must let me out because I wanted to eat the lunches, and she would just leave me in there. I never could understand why it was okay for them to eat and not for me.
Peggy's father, Melvin, was repeatedly hospitalized for tuberculosis. Peggy's mother, Winnie, had 6 children and limited options to support them.
In those days, if there was a man in the home, you could not get welfare. And I know that my mother did not have welfare. So as a way of support for herself and the children, she was prostituting. I saw her on many occasions. My father, when he found out about it, was just up in arms over it, and he would walk away from the hospital to come home and be with her. And through the process of him sitting in the bars, waiting for my mother, drinking and gambling, he became addicted to drinking and gambling, and waiting for her to come home from wherever she was. Early every morning, our house came alive with screaming sounds from my mother. But this one particular night, the screams were just different for some reason. So I got out of bed and I just followed her screams, and I stood at the door. There was a light on, and I watched my mother in the bed in excruciating pain. She was alone. My dad was back in the hospital. She was alone, and she was on her hands and knees, hanging on to the foot of the iron bed.
Peggy watched her mother as she gave birth. She watched her mother take the baby into the kitchen. She watched her mother wrap the baby in paper and run water into the sink. Then her mother turned and noticed Peggy.
And she stopped and called me into the kitchen and said, "How long have you been watching?" And I said, "I've been watching for a long, long time. Your cries awakened me." Anyway, by this time, the baby was dead. A few days later, she came, and it was at night, and she got me out of bed and told me that there was a bundle out by the gate, and she wanted me to take it into the great vineyard and bury it. And I took the baby out into the great vineyard, and I buried it.
We learned English.
Your kids can too. Just watch Hello Channel.
I remember a time when I wasn't being very nice to one of the girls at school. I didn't think it was a big deal. But in one sentence, my mom helped me understand. She said, "Mija, you need to treat others the way you want to be treated." I thought about that a lot. I still do.
Life's most important lessons are best learned in the home. A message from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I really feel that if God hadn't have been with me, that my dad would have killed each and every one of us kids right before our mother's eyes, all 6 of us, and then killed her, and then perhaps killed himself.
The transformation of a life can begin in a moment, but then take years to fully reveal itself. In Peggy Bearden's case, things had to get a lot worse before they started to get better.
For 11 years, Peggy watched her father beat her mother. One night, Peggy defended her mother by firmly punching her father in the face. They fought and she held her own, embarrassing him in front of his sons. Days later, he gave her the first gift he had ever given her.
My dad called me in one afternoon and he said, "Come here, sissy, I have a present for you." My dad never had a present for me. My dad never had a present for anybody. We just didn't have presents. But he had a present for me, and I was very excited. And he held up this jacket and he said, "It's a coat." "Oh, that's wonderful, a coat. I've never had a coat." And I heard my mother in the background go, "Oh, Melvin, please." And I thought, something clicked, you know, but I just went right straight for that jacket, and he was holding it up. He said, "Here, sissy, put your arms in it." And I just put my arms in it, and all of a sudden he just threw me around. I just went spinning, and I was just locked in this thing. And he buckled me up and tied me up, and he drug me to the backyard and hung me in a tree, a fig tree. Hung me in the tree. My legs couldn't even touch the ground, and I was there for about 3 days. My dog Patches came and got under my feet to give me support, but my dad came out every day and beat me with an old piece of a hose. He beat my legs.
The straitjacket hung in the tree for years. Nobody ever bothered to take it down. It was a constant reminder to Peggy of the terror that lived in that house, a terror that kept coming back in increasingly familiar ways. One night, Peggy again watched her mother run water into the kitchen sink.
One night, my mother found me standing at the kitchen door again, watching her. And she came over and got me and brought me into the kitchen, and she explained to me what was going on, that she wasn't able to feed the children that she had. She didn't know what else she could do. She didn't have any other choice, so she was going to show me how to do this. And the kitchen sink was already filled with water, and there was this little bundle in the kitchen sink, wrapped in paper, and she wanted me to hold it under the water, and I'm just a child, so I started kind of playing in the water, and the paper started washing off. And pretty soon, before I knew it, I saw a couple little pink legs sticking out and a bunch of little toes, and they started moving, and before you knew it, I could see that I had a little sister. I'd never had a sister. I had 3 mean brothers that I had to fight with, and I had wanted a sister so badly, and I took that baby out of that water, and I grabbed her, and I ran out that door, screaming, she's mine, you can't have her, we're not gonna kill her, she's my baby, and I'll keep her. And I took the baby and carried her all over town with me.
Peggy showed the baby to all of the neighbors so they would see it, and so her mother couldn't drown it. She raised the baby, caring for her until they were sent to different foster homes and forced apart. Peggy didn't see her sister again for another 10 years. At the age of 17, the courts returned Peggy to her mother. A few months later, she married the man next door.
I was so excited about getting married the first time because I was going to have a mother. For the first time, I was going to have a mother who was going to be there for me, and I just knew that she was going to love me. She had something like 9 children. It was a large family, and I was marrying her youngest son, but she ended up not liking me because I was a thief.
After 3 failed marriages, Peggy began to fight the greatest battle of her life: alcoholism.
I said all my life that I wouldn't do to my children what was done to me. I said I would never become what my parents were. And at the age of about 27 or 28, I fell to the awful disease of alcoholism. And I wasn't just my mother or just my father. I was both of them in one.
By this time, Peggy was up to her 6th husband. She was being arrested daily for drunk driving and afraid of losing her 2 little boys. It was then the first really good thing happened in her life.
So I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd had a friend who'd been able to quit drinking, and I called him to find out how he'd quit, and he sent a couple of women from AA over to talk with me. They carried me around to a couple of meetings for a couple of days until I got my thinking clear. I would take my little boy with me, who was about 5, and a sleeping bag, and he'd sleep while I was in the meetings, and after the meetings, I'd just roll him up and we'd go home. Alcoholics Anonymous was wonderful for me, and it helped me tremendously. But one of the things that happened with me was that I got all my thinking back, and this criminal thinking was so embedded in my mind that it also made me a better criminal.
And a better criminal is what she became. She did what she knew. She followed her mother's footsteps into the oldest profession in the world.
And I became a madam. I was taking a class at Fresno State College, and I heard some girls talking about working for an escort service. So I scooted my chair closer and I started listening to them. And these bells started ringing. My criminal mind just started spinning. The girls made fantastic money. I made fantastic money. I had a wonderful clientele. I had professional people from all over. And I ended with making lots and lots of money.
But in late 1982, Peggy made a big mistake. She put an ad in the Fresno Yellow Pages, and that ad led to her arrest.
I was sentenced to 6 years in prison. I was sent to the California Institution for Women in Fonterra, California, where I did 3 years. I was just terrified the first night they took me into prison.
While in prison, Peggy couldn't get away from the screams of the other inmates. She needed to find peace, and she found it in the one place she was never allowed to go as a child: church.
As a little girl, I couldn't go to church. They wouldn't allow me to go to church. I didn't know what God was. And here I go to prison, and I find that the only place that I can find peace is in the church. So I went to church. I was only in church a couple of times, and I loved they had a black choir, and I loved the jazzy music. We had a black chaplain, and I loved his preaching, and I wanted to join the choir. So I showed up one day for choir practice with all the black girls, and they just had a fit. They didn't want this white face in their choir, and they went to the chaplain and told him that they didn't want me in the choir. But the chaplain liked me, and he talked to them, and before you know it, I was singing in the all-black choir.
Peggy sang in the all-black choir every week. The songs she learned, songs of slavery and freedom, struck a powerful chord with her. One song in particular she grew to love.
Peggy took a long journey from a hellish upbringing to grace. We'll find out just how that amazing grace gave her a new life, and we'll meet the man who became her husband after this.
You can learn English at home. Watch Hello Channel.
I was just terrified the first night they took me into prison. The terrible noises, the awful, awful screams that never stopped.
After Peggy was released from prison, she met and married Jim Hanley. Here you both are. Welcome to The Evidence.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
And, by the way, how long were you in prison?
I did 3 years.
3 years. You come to the last day. They wish you well.
No, they just opened the gate.
They opened the gate, and this man,
No house.
This man suddenly is in the story. I mean, I say suddenly, he's here today.
Right.
How in the world did you meet Jim?
We met through a mutual friend. I'm in AA. Jim's
AA, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
All
Jim's
right.
first wife, who had passed away, was a recovering alcoholic, and then we had a mutual recovering alcoholic friend who introduced us.
Now, Jim, are you a recovering alcoholic?
No.
You were married to one, your first wife.
That's right.
So you meet Peggy. Do you know Peggy is an alcoholic when you meet her?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay.
Matter of fact, that was one of my qualifications in finding another mate, that they have a recovery in the program.
That your next life partner would be an alcoholic?
That's right.
A recovering alcoholic.
That's right.
Jim, I'm just intrigued with this. Almost as if you sense it was a life calling to remarry, as you did with Peggy, another recovering alcoholic.
I heard in Al-Anon way early, some lady said, "Boy, I'm grateful that God put an alcoholic in my life." And I thought, boy, that's the craziest thing that anybody could say.
Yeah.
But today, I'll tell you, it is the most wonderful thing God ever did to me.
Because it's done something to you.
Oh, yes.
What's it done?
Well, it has made me not to be a nuisance to other people. See, religion has a kind of a double-edged sword. You can be a religious person and just be a nuisance about it. Or your religion can be effective in changing people's lives. And I believe God needed to change me.
Really, the subplot to your own life story is that through your partnership with recovering alcoholics, transformation not only was happening in their lives, transformation is happening in your life.
Oh, yes.
Almost as if it's God's, you're suggesting God's mission for all lives to experience transformation.
Oh, yes, I think that it's absolutely true. God has a very earnest desire for everyone to find Him.
So, Peggy, was it easy to believe in God originally? You started out, I mean, that just came naturally for you?
Oh, my heavens, no. No.
Well, how'd you come to believe then?
It was very difficult. You know, AA is a spiritual background.
It's true.
And I was told when I first went to AA to fake it till I made it. And I just kept faking it.
Your life story, does it strike you as unfair?
No, not really. For many years I thought it was, but today I think I was given that life. I was given that life to see what I would do with it.
So you don't blame God?
I don't blame God at all, no.
You blame your parents?
No, no.
Blame your childhood?
No.
No?
Well, you know, I couldn't recover. I couldn't recover, and I couldn't be a child of God if I had any blame for all those people.
So Peggy, here you are, experiencing transformation now in your life journey. If you could go back and talk to the little Peggy Bearden, what would you say to her?
I would take little Peggy by the hand, and I would say, "Come and go with me." I would love to go back to that little church in that little town.
Would you?
And take that little girl and really go into that church and go to the altar with that little girl and pray with her. You see, Dwight, I was always looking for God somewhere else. I was looking for him out there. I was looking for him in a man form, because that's who I thought he was. I didn't know that he was a spirit that lived within myself, and I had to find him within my own soul. And today I know that.
Peggy, thanks so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you,
God
Dwight.
bless you both. Jim,
Thank you.
Glad you came. If you want to know more about Peggy's story, you can check her story out on our website, The Evidence, that's one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. We'll be right back after this.
Learning a new language can be difficult and discouraging, but it doesn't have to be. Hello, I'm Karen, introducing Hello Channel, the revolutionary new channel designed especially to teach English. If you can speak English, the future is open for you, since speaking English means greater opportunity and higher paying jobs. By watching Hello Channel, you are immersed in this valuable language. You'll hear the words being spoken. You'll see the speakers' mouths when they say the words. You'll read what's being spoken in large, clear subtitles. And you'll speak out loud, practicing what you have just learned. There is no better or faster way to learn a language than total immersion. Hello Channel does exactly that. There's programming on every level, so you can watch the shows that are just perfect for you. Whether you've spoken a little English, a great deal of English, or none at all, the Hello Channel has something for everyone. Join us for a convenient, affordable, and fun way to shape your future. There's so much in store for you if you'll just say hello.
Peggy Handley had the kind of childhood that dooms most people to a life of dysfunction, if not outright criminal behavior. That's what most sociologists would say her environment pointed her toward. And in fact, Peggy did have her run-ins with the law. But something remarkable happened to her in prison. Something happened that helped her, in a sense, to turn her tragic childhood upside down. Where before she was haunted by the utter absence of love, now she felt overwhelmed by it. Peggy points to an encounter with God as a source of her transformation. His love proved constant and genuine and deep. It's this unconditional love that enables her to make very different choices today. She's no longer compelled to play out her life as a victim of the destructive forces of her environment. She's no longer trapped by abuse and neglect. She's found something that gives her the leverage to overturn all that went before. I believe Peggy shows us concrete evidence of just how real God's love is. Her story makes it harder to assume that His compassion and concern are just something people imagine to get them through the night. The horrors of Peggy's childhood weren't something she imagined. The chaos of her life wasn't something she made up. All that was all too real. Even so, God's love had to be just as real in order to move her beyond it. If His love had been any less real, Peggy couldn't have overcome her childhood. She couldn't have turned a vicious cycle of abuse into a positive and productive existence. The ugliest colors and the darkest corners of life in this world sometimes make God's love shine the brightest. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.
It's important to recognize that Darwin's theory came out over 100 years ago, and that scientific theories evolve, just like everything in nature does. Physics, for instance, has evolved tremendously in the course of this century, and yet biologists are still doing neo-Darwinism.
For some years, scientists have been challenging Darwin's basic theory, and the latest evidence only intensifies that challenge. We begin with biologist Elizabeth Satoris.
The basic premise of Darwinism is that changes in evolution occur by accident and are then selected by the environment as a kind of template, letting those organisms that have particular accidental changes evolve, live, and reproduce, while other accidents may not be as viable, so that those species die out, or those individuals die, and therefore the species will die out. We, at the same time, have 50 years of laboratory evidence showing scientifically that DNA does not change by accident. If it does, it repairs itself. In other words, our DNA and that of every creature, down to bacteria, are able to sense changes in the environment that demand changes in DNA.
Experimental evidence of what scientists call directed change in DNA was published in the journal Nature in 1988. Lactose-intolerant bacteria were placed in a petri dish where the only food provided was lactose, poison to this type of bacteria. The bacteria could not reproduce without food. According to conventional Darwinian theory, the bacteria should have died, but they didn't. Instead, scientists discovered the bacteria rearranged their own DNA. They did it specifically, consciously, and quickly, making it possible for them to eat the lactose and begin to reproduce. According to the predictions of Darwin's theory, the outcome of DNA rearrangement should have 1, been random, and 2, taken place over several generations. The experimental evidence did not support either of those predictions. The results of this simple DNA experiment throw conventional Darwinian theory on its ear.
The important thing about DNA is not the chemicals that it's made of. It's the letters and how the letters are arranged. The nucleotides, as they're called, the chemical letters that direct the synthesis of protein, are not in the order that they are because of any chemical bonds between them, any more than the letters in a page in Shakespeare's Hamlet are arranged the way they are because of the chemistry of ink and paper.
Everybody agrees when we talk about inanimate objects like computers that this type of complexity can't come about by some natural means. When we move to a living system, the brain, it's as if the rules of evidence change. And science tells us that this came about by law and chance. To me, that seems illegitimate to switch the rules of evidence in comparable situations simply because one's non-living and one's living. And it's really this that brought the intelligent design movement into being.
The concept of purposeful rearrangement of DNA has caused some scientists to alter their views of evolution.
I've done a 180-degree turn as a scientist. I was taught that consciousness is a late product of evolution in a non-living universe on a non-living planet on which life evolved through accidents, through accidental changes. I don't believe that story anymore. It seems to me now that it's much more plausible to argue that consciousness comes first as a source for material creation, for material evolution. That consciousness and intelligence was there before material evolution began, because I simply cannot make sense of the idea that dumb mud should bootstrap itself into intelligence, or that non-consciousness could bootstrap itself into consciousness.
When scientists use terms like consciousness and intelligent design to explain living systems, it's clear they're taking a new approach to understanding how the life we see around us got here. And if DNA rearranges itself to meet the needs of its environment, does that suggest there's more purpose in evolution than we originally thought?
I do think that's the case. I think there's enough directionality in evolution that it at least raises the question of whether it wasn't set in motion to serve some purpose.
People have been asking for hundreds of years whether the diversity on this earth could be explained reasonably by some natural means. Today, in my opinion, the best evidence is that it cannot.
The important thing to recognize is evolution does not proceed by accident. Darwin was good in thinking up an evolution theory over 100 years ago, but theories change in science, and we've come way beyond Darwin now.
We have come way beyond Darwin, and when we come back, we'll find out why this simple mousetrap challenges the fundamental principle of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution.
Hello! The job market is a competitive place. In today's economy, extra skills mean a better job for you. Speaking English is the skill you need for greater opportunity, more money, and a brighter future. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new television channel that teaches English as you watch TV. There's something for everyone, and the more you watch, the faster you'll learn. All you have to do is say hello.
19th century naturalist Charles Darwin developed a theory of evolution that suggests life evolves step by step from simple to complex. But does the evidence support the theory? Do all organisms evolve one step at a time? Or are some systems, like machines, so complex that if any part is missing, nothing works at all? Dr. Michael Behe thinks he has an answer.
In my opinion, the strongest argument against Darwinian evolution is something called irreducible complexity. And it's a fancy phrase, but it stands for something simple. It means you've got a system or a machine or something which has a number of different parts that all have to fit together to work. And a good example of that is a mousetrap. A mousetrap you buy at the store has a spring and a platform and various other parts. And if you take one of them away, the mousetrap doesn't work anymore. And it turns out things like that are big problems for Darwinian evolution because natural selection needs to work on something that has a function, that's doing something. But with an irreducibly complex system, you only get it working when it's essentially put together.
But does nature actually assemble working systems as complex as a mousetrap? As it turns out, nature's machines can be even more complex.
A really startling example of irreducible complexity in the cell that we discovered 25 or so years ago is something called the bacterial flagellum. And the flagellum is quite literally an outboard motor that bacteria use to swim. It's got a propeller that spins around and around. It's got a motor. It's got a drive shaft that hooks the motor to the propeller. It's got a stator which keeps it stationary in the plane of the cell while it spins around. It's got bushing material that allows it to poke up through the cell's membrane. And genetic studies have shown that this little tiny machine requires about 40 different protein parts in order to work. And if you're missing the propeller, if you're missing the stator, if you're missing any one of those 40 parts, then it's not that it works half as well as it used to, it's broken, it just doesn't work at all. And how such a thing could be put together in gradual steps as Darwinian evolution requires is so far unsolved.
Debate over what Michael Behe calls irreducible complexity continues among scientists. But there's no question that his bacterial motors do exist.
These actually exist in bacteria with little discs rotating with ball bearings and stuff and spinning a little tail that drives it forward. That was a real speed up in locomotion. Those high energy bacteria were able to invade more sluggish bacteria that made their living by fermenting and to exploit them from the inside out in a kind of bacterial colonialism. But eventually, in that whole course of competition and invasion of each other and invention of technology, they stumbled on the idea of building much larger cooperative cells, which are the only other kind of cell ever to evolve on this planet. And you and I are made of them, as is every tree and mouse and bug that you can think of.
To me, this just shows really shows the tremendous complexity beneath what we have really long thought to be the simplicity of life.
In an ecosystem, every part, every species is contributing. In fact, the best life insurance for survival in a rainforest for each species is to give quality output to other species, meaning something of use to them. What we would call waste may be food for another species, it may be building materials for another species, it may be oxygen or carbon dioxide, depending on whether you're a plant or an animal, that's useful to those who breathe those gases. So everything is interplaying with everything else. Everything is contributing to the survival of everything else.
And in my mind, this complexity at the very basis of life bespeaks a design. Something like this could not have come about by the random process, even with natural selection, that Darwinian evolution envisioned.
Every single species in an ecosystem has its part. And we learn that sometimes by taking out one species and finding an entire ecosystem deteriorating. And that makes us aware of how much they are like our own bodies, where you can't remove a single organ and have the whole body function. It's only in concert, all the cells, all the organs together, that we have this awesome complexity and beauty of function.
Complexity and beauty of function appear to be compelling evidence for design in nature. But appearances can be deceiving. At one time, scientists thought that the craters in the moon formed a design that indicated intelligence. Will the concept of irreducible complexity or the directed mutation of DNA also prove to be ill-founded? How can we tell? A mathematician by the name of William Dembski recently developed an objective set of criteria, a test designed to answer that very question. We'll talk to him right after this.
Thanks for watching Hello Channel. Learn the language of the internet, travel, commerce, and diplomacy. Watch Hello Channel and learn English. Do it for yourself.
Dr. William Dembski holds a PhD in mathematics from the University of Chicago and a PhD in philosophy from the University of Illinois at Chicago. He's a recipient of 2 fellowships from the National Science Foundation and the author of several books, including the highly acclaimed, his latest book, Intelligent Design, The Bridge Between Science and Theology. Bill, it's a delight to have you here.
Thank you very
on the
much.
evidence. I am intrigued with this title. In fact, I found this line in your book. I'd like to hear you unpack this single line. You wrote, "Intelligent design is one intelligence determining what another intelligence has done."
Right.
What in the world does that mean?
Well, scientists and inquirers generally are intelligent agents, and in the world there are things that are produced by natural or unintelligent causes, but things that are also produced by intelligent causes. If you look, for instance, at ink on a sheet of paper, natural unintelligent causes can slap the ink there.
Gotcha.
But if you're going to have a Dürer woodcut or a Shakespearean sonnet, that's going to take an intelligence. And so intelligent causes, when they inquire in the world, they'll say, oh, this is the result of an intelligence, this is the result of chance, natural processes, or for all we know, it's the result of these unintelligent causes.
So you're moving from the realm of philosophy into mathematics when you come up with, what is this, a theory of information that you design. Explain that.
Design, I think historically, has been an intuition. When people have attributed design, often it's been that they've said, oh, well, it's a common sense intuition that something is designed. What we want to do is we want to nail it down. We want to say that when we attribute design, that we can do it reliably, that there are empirical criteria for doing it. And that's what we have now. We've got some criteria for detecting design. And what's crucial there is these are joint criteria. One is complexity, the other is specification. And these are big words, and it may seem
Can you break those down a little?
But I think a way of breaking it down is really to look at the movie Contact, which came out summer of '97. I think there's a key instance in this movie which I think illustrates this beautifully. In that movie, you've got these SETI researchers, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. They're astronomers. They're looking for signs of intelligence from outer space. They've got their radio observatories out there. monitoring signals. And what happens? There's a key instance in the movie where contact is established, where they know that they're in the presence of an intelligence. And what is that signal? Well, it's a long sequence of prime numbers. Prime numbers are numbers divisible only by themselves and 1. So it's 2, 3, 5, 7, not 9 because that's 3 times 3, 11, and so on,
Gotcha,
all the way up
gotcha.
to 101.
Okay.
That sequence comes in, and they say, you know, this isn't noise, this has structure. Okay? So there's a clear design inference that's drawn. So you've got a lot of stuff, a lot of numbers coming in. That's complexity. There's also a pattern. It's an objectively given pattern. You know, if they just gotten, if somebody, if it was just coin flipping that had come in from outer space, you know, random sequences of zeros and ones, there would have been complexity there, but would not have nailed it down for them that there was any intelligence. So you need, in addition to the complexity, there's got to be that pattern. But you also need the complexity, because what if just, you know, 3 prime numbers had come in, 2, 3, 5, end of story. Well, you know, you're not going to contact the New York Times science editor and say, aliens have mastered the first 3 prime numbers, you know, we've nailed it down, because that's just too little. You need complexity and you need the pattern. Once you've got that, then you've nailed it down. So we've got a reliable, empirically based criterion for detecting design, and then the question is, well, what happens when we start applying that in various special sciences, in biology, to Michael Behe's irreducibly complex systems? And it turns out that it's giving us positive evidence of design there.
Okay, if it's serious research, then might we conclude scientists by the droves are embracing intelligent design?
Well, they're willing to do design as long as the big G is not implicated, the big G being God.
All right.
As long as, you know, the design that's there can be attributed to something other than some sort of transcendence, they're comfortable with it.
Well, how could it be transferred to anything else but the big G?
Well, that's, you know, there aren't too many options. You know, I mean, you have something like Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the genetic code with James Watson, who's going to say, look, life is just too improbable to have happened here on Earth, so it had to be seeded from outer space, you know, by extraterrestrials. You know, so the design problem is pushed one step further back, but where did these extraterrestrials come from? You know, well, maybe there's some other place in the universe where they could have evolved more rapidly, more, you know, with greater success than they could here. But that just pushes the problem back.
A moment ago, you mentioned once we determine that there is design. So you are not ipso facto, you are not automatically determining design.
No.
That's not the presupposition you bring to the evidence, the object.
That's right. I mean, what I've done is laid out a formal mathematical apparatus for detecting design. Now, the question is, when we apply that apparatus to biology or to cosmology, it's an open possibility, you know, that there's no design there, or that apparatus doesn't detect design. It appears that it is, but it's a separate question, the theory from the application.
What kind of effect do you anticipate intelligent design will have on Darwinian naturalism?
The fundamental insight of Darwin's theory, the mutation selection mechanism or variation selection mechanism, that will still have a valid place, but it's not going to be the whole show, and in fact, it's probably going to have a very small, be a very small part of trying to account for biological complexity. So I think its scope is going to be radically constricted once intelligent design takes off, because when it comes to biological complexity, my view is that biology is just chock full of design. You know, you do have certain natural processes, things where Darwinian mechanisms have an influence, but design is overwhelmingly the testimony of biology.
Bill Dembski, fascinating, fascinating material. Intelligent design, the bridge between science and theology. Thank you very much for being on The Evidence. What do you think? Let us know your opinion. For more information on intelligent design, visit our website. You can find us online, www.theevidence.org, O-R-G. We'll be back in just a moment with some concluding thoughts.
Learn English and have fun.
I did something you mentioned in our last class. I drew pictures with my 5-year-old last night. Who knew she had so much to say?
I didn't understand the assignment.
I did the other thing you said. You know, get down on their level, make eye contact.
And then we just walked around the park, past the school, then we had to go by Bobby Felden's house.
I had no idea my son wanted to play the piano.
Okay, slow down. I got park, school, talk, piano. What was the other thing?
I'll be honest, at first, I was really frightened. Can you imagine a man my size playing hopscotch? But you know what? It really got things going. We related. We really did.
Very good. Next week's assignment is to eat dinner together every night and tell me what changes in your family.
Do we get extra credit for dessert?
Excellent. Class dismissed.
Give your family everything. Give them your time. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Darwin's theory suggests that life evolves through a series of chance adaptations, that life evolves from the simple to the complex, and that competition advances life better than cooperation. According to the scientists we talked to, all three of these ideas can be called into question. Why does that matter? It matters because who we are as human beings matters a great deal. Are we basically the material in our bodies? That's the worldview Darwin's theory suggests. Life is nothing more than interconnected chemical reactions. An alternative is to believe that there is a spiritual component to life, to human life. It's to believe that there is a purpose for existence, that the universe was made for us and vice versa. And that worldview comes from seeing a God behind creation. Now, it may be a big leap to go from saying that Darwin's theory is incomplete to saying that God exists, but many scientists believe precisely that because of the powerful evidence of design in nature. When they look at the intricate interrelationships among living creatures and living systems, it's hard for them not to see an intelligent designer at work. I must say I find that very compelling. Faith in God is reasonable. Faith in God is something that holds up under the microscope and out among the galaxies. We have hard evidence from just about every branch of science of how skillfully and wisely everything has been put together. That's what I think. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of the evidence.
I was somewhat of a seeker for truth, but I wasn't even really sure there even was a truth. Somebody over here could believe in one thing and that was his truth. Somebody over here could believe in something else and that was his truth. And it didn't matter if they were totally opposite of each other. The argument is that there's no absolute point. There's no Archimedean point which you could stand over and look down and judge. You know, that's your truth, that's fine, that's true for you. And that's your truth, that's fine, that's true for you. And there is no absolute truth.
The philosophy of the last half of the 20th century has often been called postmodern. The philosophy of postmodernism basically says that truth depends upon your point of view. In other words, truth, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder, which raises an interesting question. Is one person's view of God inherently any better than another's? Is there clear, objective evidence that God even exists? I'm Dwight Nelson. Let's take a look at the evidence.
From whenever you could start thinking about these things, I guess I have wondered about some of the basic questions, what is the purpose of life? Why am I here? I wasn't really on any kind of formal intellectual quest, but I did do a lot of traveling. It was just my way of looking for something. I don't know if I could even define what it was, but I was looking, and I would just travel and meet people and learn about cultures. I remember, too, at times I could be with my friends and we would be in a restaurant or a bar and whatever they're talking about, and I would always bring up, well, do you think there's maybe a God or something? And they go, oh no, Cliff's on his God thing again, even though I was probably the most secular, the most atheistic one there would be. I was aware of the implications of what it would mean if there really did turn out to be a God. And so that was something that was always kind of churning in my mind to some degree or another.
Life-changing experiences sometimes occur in the strangest places. One of the most profound changes of Clifford Goldstein's life took place in a pizza parlor.
I can remember I was sitting in this pizza parlor, eating a pizza, drinking a beer, whatever, and I was reading this philosopher, Spinoza, and he said something that changed my life right there in the pizza parlor. In order to live the most perfect life upon the earth, you needed to find out the reason why you're here and live your life accordingly. Well, it was amazing. It was like those words were almost a prefrontal lobe lobotomy. It's like they went right into my mind. And at that time, all the relativism, all the postmodernism, all the stuff that I had been raised on my whole life got wiped out, just like zoom, like those neurons were wiped out. And at that moment, it suddenly hit me that there had to be a truth. Look, here was a pizza sitting here on the table in front of me. Now, you could take 1,000 people, and 1,000 people could have come with 1,000 different explanations for how they believe the pizza got there. Maybe the god Marduk created it. Maybe an alien dropped it out of a spacecraft. Maybe it evolved. They could have had all these different views on how the pizza got there. And they could have believed them so fervently they'd be willing to die or even kill for their view how the pizza got there. Maybe they'd start religions, on their belief on how the pizza got there. But it hit me, they couldn't all be true. And maybe they all were wrong, but somewhere there had to have been an explanation for the pizza. I mean, this thing was there. It had to have an origin. And that origin, whatever it was, would have been the, quote, truth about the pizza. It just totally changed me, the sudden realization that there had to be an explanation for the world. And that explanation, whatever it was, in the same way the explanation for the pizza, whatever that would be the truth about the pizza. In the same way, the explanation for the world, and for me, and for how the world got here, that would be the truth. I remember walking out of the pizza parlor, and I was walking through the streets, and I remember thinking, if it were humanly possible, because even though I knew that an explanation had to exist, I realized it might not be possible to know it. But I thought, if it were humanly possible to know what that explanation was, I wanted to know it. I didn't care where it led me, what it cost me, what I had to suffer, what I had to give up. Now that I knew that there had to be a truth, whatever it was, I thought, oh, I wanted to know it no matter what.
Cliff's pursuit of truth took him to some surprising places and brought some unexpected sacrifices. Because in addition to his interest in philosophy and pizza, Cliff Goldstein was writing a novel.
I've had novelists in my family, writers and editors in my family, and by the time I was 12, 13, I just knew I was going to write novels. And all I ever did was read novels. I read nonstop, and I had started a novel my senior year at college, and before long, this book just became my life. It consumed my life. I didn't even care about my relationship with other people. Nothing mattered. I lived my life with one question: how is doing this or not doing whatever I'm doing, or this relationship, entering or not being in this relationship, how will that impact my writing of the book? And then I had decided at one point that I was going to go over to Europe and work on the novel in Europe, because that was part of the background to the novel. And I hitchhiked down through Europe and wound up in Greece, and then kind of on a fluke even, I ended up going to Israel, and I lived in Israel for a year and worked on the novel there for a while. Then I went back to Europe and worked on it. All I wanted to do was find somewhere where I could live and work on the book.
Clifford's pursuit of his novel competed with his pursuit of absolute truth until a spiritual experience created a dichotomy in the meaning of Clifford's life.
I had reached a point in my life where I really had reached the bottom. I had really reached the bottom, and I was probably the most depressed I'd ever been. And there was one time where I actually even thought about committing suicide. And the moment I had that thought, another thought popped into my mind was, hang on, maybe this Jesus stuff is true. And it's almost like that thought came in and popped the thought of suicide out of my mind. Yet as soon as I had that thought, I just cursed myself. And I said, look at you. Your whole life, you always viewed religious people as weak people. Oh, they couldn't handle the hard knocks of life, and so they had some little invisible bunny rabbit that they said their prayers to before they went to bed at night, and they prayed, and it made them feel better, and oh, and that made them, wasn't that nice? And I always had the most utter disdain for people like that. I thought that was so weak, and so I hated that. And now suddenly, for the first time in my life, I felt like I couldn't handle it, and I was going to do the same thing, reach out to some fake God or something to make me feel better. And I said, no way. I was too honest a seeker for truth to reach out and believe a lie, no matter how good the lie made me feel. In other words, I would rather have lived with no hope than a false hope. I'd rather have, this happened to me in Paris, and I thought about jumping off the Eiffel Tower, and I thought I'd rather jump off the Eiffel Tower and be dead rather than live a lie, no matter how good the lie made me feel. And I remember stopping there and just almost like shaking my fist up in the sky, and I said, no way. I'm too honest a seeker to believe a lie just because it makes me feel better. I said, God, if you're there, you have to reveal yourself to me. The Bible says you can turn water into wine and drop bread out of the sky and the dead be raised, and all that's fine. If you're there, you have to reveal yourself to me, and then I'll believe. Otherwise, I'll never believe ever.
Daddy's home.
Hey, hey, come here, you. Oh.
Long day.
Oh, yeah.
So just relax tonight.
I can't. It's bowling night. I'll tell you what. If you could think of something really fun to do, I'll stay home tonight. Okay?
Okay.
Honey, could you get that?
Oh, I'm not gonna make it tonight. It's a bad hair day, so.
Give your family everything.
Looking good.
Give them your time. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hello. The job market is a competitive place. In today's economy, extra skills mean a better job for you. Speaking English is the skill you need for greater opportunity, more money, and a brighter future. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new television channel that teaches English as you watch TV. There's something for everyone, and the more you watch, the faster you'll learn. All you have to do is say hello.
As Clifford Goldstein searched for truth, he found a belief in God. What he didn't expect is what that belief would cost him.
One night, out of the blue, I had this powerful experience with God, and basically what the Lord said to me was, it's either me or this book. You can have no other gods before me. See, this book, it wasn't that the book was evil in and of itself, but it was my relationship to the book. This book was my life, and I realized that God had to come first. And it boiled down to where if I wanted the Lord, the book had to go. And the thing that I remember clearly more than anything was I had free choice. In other words, I didn't have to burn this book. God was saying, if you want me, you wanted truth, here I am, but this book is going to have to go because that's your God. And it was kind of a very involved struggle, but in the end I made the choice and I ultimately burned that book, and that was a night my life changed forever. It wasn't, quote, logical, it wasn't rational, for lack of a better word. It was just a very personal thing that I have that changes my life. In a sense, I'm broken, and my clinging to the world, this thing that meant to me the most, this book, I destroyed it, I burned it, and it was like I was severed my connection from the world. It was almost a way to describe it. I burned that book, I gave up my writing. I realized I might not ever write again. And then, within a year or two later, I started writing again. And I've been writing for almost nonstop for 18, 19 years since. I ended up, right after that, I met some people in a health food store and who were believers. And I told them about what happened. And they said, you want to study the Bible? And I said, yeah. And what do you want to study? They said, and I said, I want to study prophecy. And they immediately took me to Daniel 2. And this was, it's an amazing story, Daniel 2. And basically, it's funny. There's two parts to it. You've got this whole section where this king has a dream. And he's very upset. And he calls all these wise men in and tells them, tell me what the dream is, interpret the dream for me. Of course, they can't tell the guy what the dream is. He doesn't even remember the dream himself. So he threatens to kill them all. And then he's going to kill among them, Daniel and some of the other Hebrew captives. And Daniel goes, prays, and in the vision in the night, Daniel is shown the truth of the king's dream, and he tells the king the dream. The king saw a statue, just a statue of a man, and the head was of gold, and this was symbolic of Babylon. The arms and breasts were silver. This was symbolic of Medo-Persia, the next kingdom. The belly and thighs were brass. That was the next kingdom, Greece. The legs were iron. That was the next kingdom, Rome. And the feet were iron and clay mixed together. Well, after the Roman Empire collapsed, you got the nations of modern Europe. So you've got the sweep of world history starting from 500-600 years before Christ up through the time that we're living in today. I have something here that shows me, I can come back to it anytime I want, that shows me the reality of God, because it shows me that not only is God in control of the nations, but God can tell the future. And so I see here, I've got, in my mind, it's irrefutable evidence. And I figure, if this God is in control of all that and knows all that, then he certainly can handle anything that comes in my life. See, prior to that experience, I had read the Bible. People had given me the Bible, but I tried to read the Bible. I never got past the talking snake story in Genesis. I thought the Bible was the rantings and ravings of a bunch of flea-bitten camel herders. They got tired of lugging these big stone idols around the desert, so they made up some notion of some God they couldn't see, said he was one, named him Yahweh, and that was the religion of the Bible. It was late Bronze Age camel herder myths. But then I met personally the God of the Bible. I met the God of the Bible.
Clifford Goldstein had a powerful, personal, life-changing experience, but he wanted that experience to be grounded in objective reality. For him, the prophecy of Daniel 2 gave him just what he needed. We'll learn more about that prophecy, the one that changed his life, right after this.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
I'm delighted to have my friend Dr. Jacques Ducan here at the Evidence today. Welcome, Jacques.
Thank you.
Why is it that prophecy can have such a profound effect upon the reader?
When you come to biblical prophecy, why it has an effect on you, it is because suddenly you realize that God, the invisible God, the one you don't see and you don't have any tangible evidence, is in fact present in history among us.
So you're making a distinction between biblical prophecy and the supermarket tabloids. You know, the prophet, Nostradamus, there's a big
there would be
interest publicly in prophecy today. But you're saying there's a difference between biblical prophecy and the popularized versions.
Yeah, I would say the main difference had been noticed already by Flavius Josephus, this Jewish historian from the early century, the first century. He was observing prophecies in general, and he said, well, even within biblical prophecy, he said, Daniel is the greatest prophet. And the reason why he was saying that is that he observed that Daniel added to his predictions figures. He did not just...
it wasn't just generic descriptions of the future.
Speaking about, vaguely about the future, but he ran risk. And he gave figures about these predictions. Of course, there are some people who are, some Nostradamus, to a certain extent, gives also figures, but what would be the difference here is that those figures correspond to the reality. I mean, you can check them.
So he's not some kind of a religious wacko or a fanatic that has just kind of moaned and groaned over some sort of prophetic word.
Yeah, and this is why he realized that he doesn't have naturally the answer. And the only way for him to get the answer is not to seek the answer within himself, but to look for the answer, to ask for an answer from someone who would have the answer. And this is why he's praying.
And he says in Daniel 2, he received the answer from God.
That's right.
Now, how do we know that, in fact, he received the answer from God? Because there are some. And but Jacques, hold on just a minute.
Yes.
It'd be very easy to conclude that prophecy is just history written with the future tense. Yeah. Okay, history's already happened. Now I'm going to put will, when I already know it's happened, and it'll look like prophecy.
Yeah. First of all, from the book itself, Nebuchadnezzar realizes that the explanation of his dream will be the right explanation, because he suddenly realized that the dream he understood, because he had the dream. He recognizes the dream when he hears it in the lips from the mouth of Daniel. So that's the first answer I would say. Now,
because I'm going to say, look, a guy writing it 300 years later could easily make Nebuchadnezzar recognize the dream and just make the story neatly fit.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that?
With regards to the book of Daniel, we have a controversy, and you are pointing the finger on it. Some people say, well, the book of Daniel has been written in 2nd century BC. He could not have written, it remains still a prophecy, because he has spoken about 4 kingdoms, and he has spoken, and the 4 kingdoms being in the 3rd kingdom, that is the Greece, he could not speak about the 4th kingdom, that is Rome.
So it's still a prophetic...
Still, yes, and when you see the way he's talking about the 4th kingdom, followed by another kingdom, which is made of a combination of the religious and the political. When you look at the history, you see that it fits very well.
So Cliff Goldstein, you know the story.
Yes.
He's in this, he has this awakening, as it were, goes to the prophecy, the ancient prophecy, and experiences the divine as he reads it. Is it possible for a 3rd millennial human being to pick up that same ancient document and experience something existential, something that happens within him or within her? How could that be?
if there is one place within the Bible, which is a holy, sacred book, which seems to be very far away, old book, dusty, completely irrelevant, if there is one book which in fact makes this statement to us today in postmodern, this is the book of Daniel. It is the fact that spirituality, I mean prayer, the religious, the mystical, all these things which seems to, for most of us, far away and strange. In fact, for the book of Daniel, from the point of view of the book of Daniel, this spirituality is put in the flesh of history, in the flesh of existence. It is not something apart from reality.
You believe that that is evidence for God?
God cannot give an evidence of himself. The only evidence God gives to humans is other humans or human history. This is the only visible thing we have. Biblical prophecy is telling us, look at history. Look at human testimonies. They are the evidence of God. So we are supposed in this course of history, when we look at history, I mean, honestly, we are supposed to recognize out there the evidence of the heavenly God in earthly history. And this is one of the points of the book of Daniel.
Jacques, what a pleasure to have you with us on The Evidence. Thank you for what you've shared with us. In fact, if you would like to examine more carefully the research Dr. Dukan has done in the area of ancient prophecy, this book, his book, Secrets of Daniel, is available at our website. Let me put our website address on the screen for you, theevidenceoneword.tv. You can go to that same website if you'd like more of Clifford Goldstein's story. You want to interface ancient prophecy with life in the third millennium, check out that website. I'll be back in a few moments for some concluding thoughts.
Daddy's home.
Hey, come here, you. Oh.
Long day.
Oh, yeah.
So just relax tonight.
I can't. It's bowling night. I'll tell you what. If you could think of something really fun to do, I'll stay home tonight. Okay?
Okay.
Honey, could you get that?
Oh, I'm not gonna make it tonight. It's a bad hair day, so.
Give your family everything.
Looking good.
Give them your time. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Hello. That's right, I said hello. I'm talking about an exciting new television channel that will change your life. My name is Ruth, and I want you to be one of the first to know about Hello Channel. Hello Channel is designed to teach you to speak English. Anyone can learn. We offer something for everyone. You'll see programming for children, teenagers, and adults, all on different levels. With Hello Channel, you'll hear, see, read, and speak English as you're watching entertaining television programs, making it easy to learn. If you've always wanted to learn English but haven't had a chance, Hello Channel is perfect for you. Start today, and remember, for a brighter future, just say hello.
We've gone today from a pizza parlor in 20th century Florida to the ancient kingdom of Babylon in the 6th century BC. We've gone from the subjective personal encounter of one man with God to an impressive prophecy based on something as firm and objective as world history itself. It's been an incredible journey. The question, though, remains, what does all of this mean? What it means, at least to me, is this. Whatever our relationship with God, no matter how meaningful our experiences with Him, we can build that relationship on a solid foundation, a foundation that can't be moved, it can't be shaken by the various political or social or philosophical winds that blow down our streets and the cold alleyways of our communities. I believe that anyone open-minded, anyone truly seeking answers to life's most important questions, will find in Daniel 2 powerful evidence for the existence of God and His involvement in the affairs of this world. But don't take my word for it. Open the text for yourself. Read them for yourself. Ask yourself, how could these things have been portrayed so accurately if no God revealed them? And then finally ask yourself some real hard questions about life. Not about life in general, but about your own life. Where is it going? And whether you want to continue to live on your own or instead have the same God who could predict the history of the world with such accuracy guide your life as well. Tough questions, life-changing questions, important questions to be sure, but questions you can't afford to put off forever, especially if forever isn't far away. For the evidence, I'm Dwight Nelson.
One evening, all of the information that I had collected for years all came together one instant in time and revealed a truth to me that absolutely blew me away.
Dr. Bruce Lipton is a cellular biologist who focused his research on discovering how cells know what to do. In other words, he wondered how the brain of the cell controlled the rest of the cell. During the course of his research, he made an astounding discovery, one that changed the course of his life. We caught up with him at his home near Santa Cruz, California.
As a conventional biologist, I held the belief that I was just a mechanism and that my life was just the unfoldment of these molecules. And therefore, I really felt that I was an accident, just as Darwin would have said, that I accidentally got here and I'm an accident in the world. And basically, I was just trying to run my life in the best way I possibly can, figuring that I got dropped into this picture, I'm a machine, I'm here right now, and then at the end, I'm gone back into dust. So make the best I could of what I had.
Bruce Lipton continued his research into the cell. Like most biologists, he accepted the notion that genes control the behavior of a cell, that genes function as the cell's brain. But the results of his research varied so greatly from conventional scientific theory, he began to look for a different mechanism, a mechanism other than genes that controlled the cell.
And about 1985, after about 10 years of seeking alternative mechanisms, one evening all of the information that I had collected for years all came together one instant in time and revealed a truth to me that absolutely blew me away.
On the island of Grenada, where he lived at the time, Dr. Lipton sat up late one night reviewing his research. Around 2 a.m., all of the information he had gathered gelled into a startling revelation.
The exciting part was just before this revelation came, I was working on the understanding of the mechanisms that actually control biology, and I found that by then I already knew that the control was in the skin of the cell, called the cell membrane, which is the equivalent of our skin, in fact, and that I was understanding the mechanism. So I had described the structure and function of the cell membrane, and had come down to 3 different points, bullets about the understanding. And these points were: the cell membrane is a liquid crystal, the cell membrane is a semiconductor, and the cell membrane possesses gates and channels. So I write these down, sit back, and then read this and say, the membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And all of a sudden, my whole life changed, because I said, I've heard this phrase before, but it's not a biological phrase. And I tried to recall, where did I hear this? And there on the left side of my desk was my first computer. And sitting right next to it was a book from Radio Shack, a simpleton book on understanding how my computer worked. And I opened up the book, and on page 3 in the introduction of this book is a description of a computer chip. A crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. I said, the cell membrane is a computer chip. And the cell nucleus, where the genes are, is a hard drive where the genes were programs. And all of a sudden, it became perfectly clear that the environment was typing on the keyboard, which is the surface of the cell, drawing up programs from the genes to match the environmental signals. So as I perceive the environment, I select genes that will adjust my physiology and my body to meet that perception. The significance? What I believe is what I become.
When Bruce Lipton realized the source of control over his cells came from outside his body instead of inside, it changed his entire perspective of reality and gave him a new understanding of God.
Before this revelation, so to speak, my concepts regarding God and spirit were pretty much like most scientists, and that is that there might be a God, there might be spirit, but it wasn't necessary to invoke them to understand life. So scientists don't necessarily deny there's a God, but really suggest that if there's a God, God's probably busy doing other things, and that life can be understood just by the molecules and the mechanism. But after this understanding, it really revealed that there was much more to me than this physical reality, that there was an energy, a spirit, or a God that was controlling this biology that I was experiencing.
With this new understanding, Dr. Lipton felt he had discovered, in a sense, the secret of life. And his excitement over that discovery brought about dramatic change.
As a scientist, I work in my head doing all kinds of calculations, data, and all the experimental understanding, hypotheses, etc. But by the moment this realization of the mechanism of what actually controls life, when that actually hit me, there was a complete and profound physiological change in my body that I went from my head into my heart. Then the joy was so overwhelming that tears started to well up in my eyes, and I was feeling very choked up all about it. It was interesting because as a scientist, as I said, having been in my head all my life, this entrance into my heart changed my whole outlook and expression of life, and it was so peaceful. And the peace that came over me was, for the first time, I actually saw that I was more than just this body.
For Bruce Lipton, the biology of a cell persuaded him that God exists. When we come back, we'll meet a former atheist whose pathway to God began with a study of physics.
People who would talk to me about their religious dogma, I would just be so dismissive of. I couldn't understand how they didn't see that that was simply a naive and ignorant belief to which they subscribed to assuage their fear of death.
We learned English.
Your kids can too. Just watch Hello Channel.
I was, without a doubt, the most arrogant and supercilious atheist who ever existed. I was like the recent ex-smoker who walks up to other smokers and tells them how they're wrong and they should stop doing it, and how I've learned so I know they can learn.
How does one become an atheist? Why does a person get so committed to disbelief in God they want to change the mind of everyone they know? What could possibly have made Christine Casey, when she was 13 years old, reject the very existence of God?
My father at that time was an alcoholic, and a pretty abusive alcoholic, and it was a real struggle to deal with that. I remember after a particularly harsh confrontation, I vividly remember turning to my mother with tears in my eyes and saying, if a God exists that lets this kind of thing happen to people, that's not a God I'm willing to believe in. And that was it. That was the break. It was that abrupt a decision for me.
Her mother, a conservative Christian, was dismayed by Christine's decision. She hoped Christine would find peace and comfort through faith in God. But Christine found the comfort she needed not in her mother's church, but in the intellectual pursuit of science.
Science did not judge me. And in the same way that I had been taught that God and religious dogma judged us as individuals. Science only judged the world as it saw it. And so there was sort of an intellectual egalitarianness to science and scientific study. And it was incredibly appealing to me. It was calming, it was non-confrontational, and it was about the world around us rather than the world inside us.
In college, Christine took a physics major and delighted in challenging any religious person who happened to cross her path.
People who would talk to me about their religious dogma, I would just be so dismissive of. I couldn't understand how they didn't see that that was simply a naive and ignorant belief to which they subscribed to assuage their fear of death.
Content in her scientific worldview, everything was fine for Christine until one day, in physics class, something happened.
So I'm sitting in an undergrad physics class, and my professor is doing an example and showing us how basically rocket propulsion works and equal and opposite forces and etc. He's taken a red wagon and he has strapped a fire extinguisher to it, and he sits down and mounts the red wagon, and he's holding onto the handle and he's holding onto the nozzle of the fire extinguisher and hitting it, and of course that's making him fly, accelerate across the room. Basic propulsion, basic natural laws. And I remember asking him why. Well, why does this work? And he said, this is how it works. And I said, well, great, I get that this is how it works, and I understand how the math defines that. But why does it do that? Why does it consistently do that? And he said, Christine, science doesn't tell us why. Science just tells us how. I was stunned. So I spent several months in a great deal of confusion after this epiphany, until eventually I realized that whatever it is that we believe strongly in requires an element of faith. So in a lot of ways, I've actually moved away from science. In being able to make a decision to place my faith where I chose, science became relegated to a more natural and simple place in my life. And that was fine, that was good. It still has a beautiful value for me. When I look up at the stars at night and I think about the natural forces that define their movement and their relationship to each other, that's very awe-inspiring to me. And it's inspiring to me that we as human beings can understand a little of it. It is equally inspiring to me that those natural forces are in some way elements of God. They're elements of the whole universe that we can't yet define and that we can't yet understand, but that is out there for us to discover.
Christine has come a long way, from an abusive childhood, through atheism, and finally to spirituality and God. Through it all, she has maintained her love for science. She also says that faith in something greater than herself helps her overcome fear, even the fear of abuse. We asked her how she sees God now, in a world where pain is so prevalent.
I reconcile the simultaneous existence of pain in the world and God really easily today. I think that as human beings, and especially in our Western culture, we're taught that pain is an awful thing to be avoided at all costs, and that comfort is the thing to be sought. But the truth is that pain is opportunity. Given that it's unavoidable, it's an incredible opportunity to learn and to grow and to become the very best of who we are. A very trivial example is me, my weight. I'm a big girl. And as a big girl in very thin society, there are certain kinds of things that I've had to deal with, like prejudice and, you know, I go out riding my bike and obscenities getting yelled from pickup trucks and, you know, things like that, that are incredibly hurtful in their way, but they've made me the kind of strong and more compassionate person that I am today. And I kind of like the person that I am.
Science taught Christine Casey that she could choose her belief system. She chose to believe in God, and that enabled her to live a life without fear. When we come back, we'll talk to Hyveth Williams about her pathway from politics to God.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hyveth Williams was a prominent government official in the city of Hartford, Connecticut. While running for mayor there, she went through a deeply disturbing period of her life that transformed her priorities. Now her ultimate goal is to be the chaplain of the United States Senate. Hyveth, it is a delight to have you here.
I am very pleased to be here with you.
This story begins in politics. I mean, you're into city politics?
Yes.
How did that start?
It started with a dare to the mayor. I had a talk show on a radio station, and he had only recently taken over the position. He was deputy mayor and was now acting mayor, waiting for the elections, and I thought he wasn't doing a good job. And so on my radio program, I said I could do his job with a blindfold and my hands tied behind my back.
That night.
His police officer happened to be tuning the radio as he was driving him in the limousine when I came on saying these things, and he changed his direction and drove to the station and walked into the station and yanked the microphone and said, "I dare you to do it. I take you on." And of course, the phones lit up, and the station manager, that was the best thing that could have happened. And so we took the dare for 3 weeks. He became mayor, and I worked for him as his executive assistant for 8 or 9 years, ran his campaigns, did just about everything. And then at the end of that time period, I decided I should have done what I started out to do in the beginning and run against him. And then this incredible thing happened to me where God came into my life.
In the middle of politics?
In the middle of a political campaign.
How could that be?
I don't know, because I didn't believe in God at all. I was an atheist, and I was known around town to be an atheist. There were people who claimed to be Christians who would come to my office, and I would just laugh at them and call them Jesus freaks. And then I started hearing voices, and then it was crazy. Because
when you say hearing voices,
I have told this story over and over again to my embarrassment and humiliation, but I was being interviewed by the local TV station, and suddenly I heard out in the heavens, "Hyveth," and so I'm talking to this fella like I'm talking to you, and then I looked up and said, "What?" And so my friends and I thought that I had flipped, thought that I had gone crazy.
Sure.
And so we all agreed that the best thing for me to do was to just secretly go and admit myself into the Institute of Living, which is the mental hospital near my home in the city. And we were really determined to do that, except that God sent someone with a Bible to me before I went to the mental institution.
When you say God sent someone knocked on your door?
No, it didn't happen
or,
that way.
Yeah?
I was one day in the office, you know, the mayor and I were now having a political battle. And so he invited me in the office with the personnel director, and I was in his face. I was bold and brassy, and I was in his face just cussing, just carrying on. And the personnel director said, "Do you not know that a soft answer turneth away wrath?" And that just really tore inside of me, just made all the difference to me. And I asked him, did you get those words? And he gave me a red King James Bible, and I read it from cover to cover.
So Hyveth, you hear these voices.
Yes, I believe it was the voice of God.
How long did it take you to come to that conviction that in fact that was God calling you?
It took perhaps about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. I went through a period, I had a very unusual experience where I couldn't speak at all. I had no voice and I could not frame words. For about 2 weeks, I had to write everything. When I came out of it, in order to speak words, I had to change the pattern of my speech so it wouldn't hurt. And I think God was simply just cleaning up my mouth in a very drastic way, because I deserved it, really.
You go through a crisis.
Yes.
But it's not a personal encounter yet, really a deeply personal relationship yet.
No.
So
no.
How does that come into your life?
One of the times, I'll give you one experience. One of the times I was laying in bed, and I felt myself slipping away into a deep, deep, subconscious, unconscious state. And I saw myself step outside of my body. And I know this is really eerie for some people, but this is what I experienced, and I need to tell the truth as to how I experienced it then. And most people say that when this happens, they see the light and, you know, their light flashes in front of them. That didn't happen to me.
No lights.
No lights, no life of flashing by in a panoramic scene, except a list of ice cream flavors. Can you believe this?
Ice cream
A
flavors.
list of ice cream flavors. That's all that I saw. And I started screaming, I haven't had pistachio. I haven't had mud pie. I want to live so I can eat these flavors.
Have mercy.
And so in the time of crying this out, I heard a voice. And I knew then it was not a normal human voice. I heard this voice say to me, if you follow me, I will give you life everlasting. And I said, yes. And he said, you will know that I spoke to you, because from now on, wherever you go, you will find a rose. There has never been a place that I've been that I have not. Even in the deepest winter, I've been in Nebraska when everything is covered with snow, and I have found a flower. I was walking one day, I was really down in the dumps, and I went to the lake, Lake Michigan, and I was just walking on the beach. It was covered with snow. I was walking on the lake front. Everything was snow. The water was covered. And I'm trudging along, and I'm just depressed, and I'm saying, God, what do you want with my life? Why do you do this to me? Why do you put me through these terrible things? Some people don't even believe me that I'm telling the truth. And I'm walking along, and right there on the beach, in the middle of the snow, is this rose. And I just knew that God had spoken to me and that he called me. And
beautiful.
It's just...
So your life has never been the same since?
My life has never been the same since.
In the midst of all of this, what leads you to believe God cares?
Because every person that's been born on the earth, whether they've accepted him as God or not, are his children. We're all his children, and he loves us. He cares. He wants to protect us. He wants to deliver us. He wants to give us peace and life and safety. He wants us to be free to think and be creative and to live, to have abundant life. He is incredible. He has all of these things, and he wants to give them to us just like now. He's been giving them to me. That's why I'm appealing to anybody who's watching. Take my word for it. I didn't read this in a book. I wasn't taught this at the seminary. I am telling you what I know for sure. This I know. I will die by this. I know this to be true.
Iveth, it's been a real pleasure to have you on The Evidence.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Would you like to know more about the stories of our guests that you've seen on today's show? You can find out by visiting our website. It's one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. We'll be right back after this.
Learn English on your level, in your home, on your schedule. Introducing Hello Channel, an exciting new way to learn English as you build a better future. Join us and say hello.
After listening to people talk about their journey toward faith, it's clear that we choose our belief system more than it chooses us. It's not just something that gets dumped on us. It's a conscious choice, a choice that we're responsible to make. People like Bruce Lipton, Christine Casey, and Iveth Williams show us that what we choose to believe makes a difference in the way we live our lives. Believing that we're the products of blind, mechanistic forces will take us one way. Believing that we are the creation of a loving God will take us another. Believing that our destiny is confined to right here and right now, that we just have to run our lives as best we can, will take us one way. Believing that we have a destiny that transcends history will take us another. When it comes down to a choice between putting my faith in chance or putting my faith in God, the choice is clear. I choose God. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.